He also writes Al-Iqtisad fil I'tiqad, which is the well-balanced way in creed. He writes this kitab because he's asked to explain what's the simplest way to explain creed. And you've seen that book.
Mm-hmm.
And that book is, you can tell the amount of ahadith that are in that book, that's taking a very hadith-based approach to the study of i'tiqad. It's very hadith-based.
Incredible.
So everything's, here's the hadith, here's this, right? It's very hadith-based. Then he writes his Kitab al-Tawheed, right? Which is, again, it's i'tiqad, it's hadith-based. Okay, so like the ahadith on the istiwa, it's just ayat ahadith, right? And then the ahadith about nuzul, ayat ahadith, right? The ahadith on the rahmah of Allah, ayat ahadith. The ahadith, okay, who understands this? Look, just quote after quote of the Sahaba. These Sahaba understand this. They all quote this. This is the way this is understood. The tabi'in, this is where they understand, right? So this is what it leads to him doing this. And as we discussed, the Ash'ari have only just gotten a foothold. They arrived in the 500s in North Africa. They're now sweeping eastward. And at this point, this is before Salahuddin Al-Ayyubi has taken over and defeated the Crusaders. This is before this point. So at this point, Al-Azhar is still Shiite because Al-Azhar was built by the Fatimiyya and it's Shiite at this point. When Salahuddin Al-Ayyubi rahimahullah takes over, he converts Al-Azhar into a Sunni institution. And then what he does is he pours a huge amount of money into Al-Azhar with respect to teaching the four madhabs, but being that he knows what he knows, he heavily weights it towards the Shafi'i fiqh and the Ash'aris, right? That's what he knows.
Right.
So that's what he does. But he also pours money into the awqaf for other madhahib, right? Because he's balanced. Because who's in his army? Abu Umar al-Maqdisi is one of his generals, one of his top generals. Muwaffaq al-Qudama, who's 43 at this time. So Muwaffaq al-Qudama is 43. Abu Umar al-Maqdisi is 53, right? Bahauddin al-Maqdisi is there, right? All these people are there in the army. Same thing, Abdul Ghani Al-Maqdisi, they're in the army. The Hanabila are the backbone of Salahuddin's army at the highest level. So he is single-handedly responsible for spreading the Ash'ari there scholastically, and then also in Sham. But in Sham, they don't yet have a strong enough base. You don't start to hear institutions like Jami al-Ashrafiyya saying, you can't come here unless, you can't attend here unless you're Ash'ari. You make a declaration of the Ash'ari i'tiqad. That comes later.
Right.
They've not established a base for themselves yet. They're still very much in their nascent years where they're trying to build a backbone. In the East, some Ash'ari theologians that came as missionaries in the East were expelled by the Maturidiyya because the Maturidiyya had not heard of them yet, right? So they were expelled because the Maturidiyya, at this point, remember, the early Maturidiyya aren't using ilm al-kalam for the most part. The early Maturidiyya are not using Neoplatonist reasoning, perfect being theory. They're not all these perfect being theory, the atomism theory. They're not using any of those things. So when you look at the early Maturidiyya and the Hanabila, they're almost joined at the hip, like theologically. The Maturidiyya and Ash'ari don't start to become really close until after a period of time. And this is after the Ash'ari become established in North Africa. This is after Salahuddin Ayyubi's huge work to push the Shafi'i madhab and the Ash'aris with it. And it's at that point that the Shafi'is and Ash'ari have become seen as like a whole thing. That, okay, well, if you're Shafi'i, you must be Ash'ari. Right. He's the one that causes that. Before that time, that association wasn't there. That if you are Shafi'i, that you're necessarily Ash'ari. That association was not there. Because Abu Bakr al-Ismaili, who wrote the famous I'tiqad book, he's Shafi'i, but he's not Ash'ari.
No.
Al-Lalaka'i, who writes Usul al-I'tiqad, he's Shafi'i, but he's not Ash'ari. Sahal al-Tustari, he's Shafi'i, but he's not Ash'ari. Right? All these people that you start to associate, right, they are not Ash'ari. So Ash'ari and Shafi'i does not become synonymous until Salahuddin Ayyubi makes it so. right? Which was because he's thinking, I need to build schools, I need to have a structure. So I already know what I know. So if I'm going to establish the Shafi'i school, then I'm going to also establish the Sharia with it. And so Al-Azhar becomes associated with that to where this is what we teach, right? This is what we teach. Now, the idea, now, Salahuddin Ayyubi, remember, these people are on his army and they have these differences, but it's not extreme, right? So, as a quick aside before we move forward, Ibn Abdul Baqi al-Ain al-Athar says that Ahl Sunnah is three. The Athariyah, their Imam Ahmad al-Hanbal. The Maturidiyah, their Imam is Abu Mansur al-Maturidi. And the Sha'ira, their Imam is Abu Hasan Al-Ash'ari. That's the first time historically that we have that mentioned in that way. It's been said, Al-Qadi Abu Ya'la says that the Ash'ari from Ahl Sunnah, when they first arose and he witnessed them, 450, that's true. But the first time that expression is used is in that area. And Ibn Abdul Baqi, he dies around 1014 Hijri. This is way before Zabidi or others say Ahl Sunnah is the Ash'ari Maturidiyya. Right. This is way before that. This is way before that because he wrote that, he uttered that expression and wrote it around 990, 980 Hijri. So everyone at that point already knew that Ahl Sunnah is those three jama'ah. No. It would not be until far down the line that people start saying Ahl Sunnah is just the Maturidiyya and Ash'ari. That's later down the line. So I think that's important to understand because what's about to happen with Abdul Ghani Wahid Al-Maqdisi doesn't make sense unless we first understand those crucial points. Okay? So he writes this kitab. And when he writes that kitab, one of the historians, Ibn al-Najjar, as well as Legacies Al-Maqdisi, says about him that وَكَانَ كَثِيرُ الْعِبَادَةِ كَثِيرُ الْعِبَادَةِ. He was known for having high levels of worship. He was known for his wara' ala qanun al-salaf, and he stayed strictly adhering to the manners of the first three generations in their way. He was always in Damascus narrating a hadith وينتفع به الناس إلى أن تكلم في الصفات والقرآن بشيء أنكره عليه أهل التأويل من الفقهاء. And people continued benefiting from him up until the point that when he was asked to speak about the attributes in the Quran, he spoke, and there was something that the people of Ta'wil did inkar upon him from the fuqaha, وَشَنَعُوا بِهِ عَلَيْهِ, and they expressed great hatred for him. وَعَدَ لَهُ مَجْلِسْ بِدَارِ السُّلْطَانِ حَضْرُهُ الْقَضَاءُ وَالْفُقَهَاءُ فَصَرَّ عَلَى قَوْلِهِ. And what they did is they went to, those people went to the assembly of the office of the Sultan of the area, and a gathering of qadis and fuqaha that were people of Ta'wil, and they went to them and narrated some of his statements. وَبَحُوا إِرَاقَةَ دَمِ, and they asked that it may be made permitted to spill the blood of Abdul Ghani ibn Abdul Wahid al-Maqdisi. وَشَفَ فِي جَمَاعَةٍ إِلَى السُّلْطَانِ. But another group went to the Sultan and said, leave him alone. إِلَى السُّلطَانِ مِنَ الْأُمَرَاءِ وَالْأَكْرَادِ, from the scholars from the rulers in the area, and also some of the Kurds, because a lot of the Kurds liked listening to Abdul Ghani Al-Maqdisi, and these are people, the Kurds at this time are Ash'ari. Okay. وتوسط وأمره إليه على أن يخرج من دمشق إلى ديار مصر فأخرج مصر. So they asked for a go-between that he might go from Damascus to Egypt to remain safe for the meantime. So he went there to Egypt while matters calmed down. It was also said of him by Yusuf ibn Khalil al-Halab, right? It's an Ash'ari scholar. He says of Abdul Ghani Abdul Wahid al-Maqdisi, كان ثقة ثبتا دينا مأمونا حسن التصنيف. He says that Abdul Ghani Abdul Wahid al-Maqdisi is ثقة, he's trustworthy. ثبتا, that he is well established in the religion. دينا, established on his religion and trusted. Good narratives, good books. كثير الإيثار. He was regular in his goodness. كان يصلي كل يوم وليلة 300 ركعة. Every day he used to pray 300 extra rak'ah. ويأمر بالمعروف وينهى عن المنكر. And he used to enjoin the right and forbid the wrong. And he was left alone up until he heard someone say, "Lafzi bil Qur'ani makhluq." My recitation of the Quran is created. Baba. He refused to say this or go any further. And he said, this should not be said. And because of this, فَمُنِعَ مِنْ تَحْدِيث بِالدِّمَشْقِ وَسَفَرَ الْمَصْرِ وَقَامَ بِهَا إِلَى أَنْ مَاتَ. And once he refused to do that, he was not allowed to narrate hadith in Damascus and Jami Bani Umayyah. And so he traveled to Egypt and remained established there up until he died. So this is what started to happen. There's another incident in which when he refused to affirm and say that the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are majaz and have no haqiqah, because we already discussed this about al-Ayyubi and things that were in there. He refused to do this. So they went to one of the local governors to ask to see if they could get him killed. But the governor saying, this is the second time you brought news to me about this man. Why are you bringing me news about this man? I don't want him killed. So they then decided to try to address him in debate. Al-Din al-Maqdisi rahimahullah said whenever he went out to teach the people hadith or answer questions, كان يستعمل السواك كثيرا حتى كأن أسنانه البرد. Whenever he would go out to address the people or speak to them or narrate hadith or answer their questions, he used to always use the siwak a great deal, to the point that his hadith, that his teeth were white like snow. So that means he brushed his teeth. He took very good care of his teeth. His teeth were very, very white. So he went out and he answered their questions. But when he answered their questions, they were not satisfied with his response. And so now they began to ask him to debate. And he refused to answer regarding the debate, but said that he will just quote ayat and hadith. They asked him to answer certain questions. And he said, I will answer them. So they said, answer regarding jihad, direction, istiwa, harf and sawt. And when he answered with ayat and hadith and affirmed that they have a haqiqah, وَأَجْمَعَ فُقَهَاءَ عَلَى الْفَتْوَى بِكُفْرِهِ وَأَنْهُ مُبْتَدِعٌ لَا يَجُوزُ أَنْ يَتْرُكْ بَيْنَ مُسْلِمِينَ. They said, the group of Ash'aris that were there said, we've come together with a fatwa that he is a kafir and that he's an innovator, and that it's not permitted that him or no two Hanbalis in this neighborhood be seen together. But the wali of the area would not allow them to do so for the whole area. They then went to another wali and they brought him news saying he does not negate nuzul, but he says كان الله ولا مكان وليس هو اليوم على ما كان منها مسألة الحرف والصوت. He says that Allah was when there was no place for him, and he says he, Allah, is now as he ever was. And over the issue of harf and sawt, he affirms. Now he's affirming all the principles of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, but they're looking for small issues, terminology, other things. And as they're looking and digging into them, they're saying, no, what he really means is this. And because he won't say that nuzul has no haqiqah, because they want him to say this majaz. They want him to say the istiwa is majaz, that the sifat al-khabariyah are majaz. But he says, no, it's haqiqah. And they said, well, the only way it's haqiqah is if it's tajseen. Because you have to remember what happened with al-Qadi Abu Ya'la, what happened with the i'tiqad al-Qadiri, all those other things. It's come here now. It was in Baghdad, but now it's in Damascus. Right? Now it's in Damascus. And this is Mukhtasar fi Usul al-Din's already been written. Ibtal al-Ta'wilat was written, and i'tiqad al-Qadiri, like all this stuff that was supposed to resolve this was already done. But it's here yet again. So he's affirmed all these affairs, but they decide that they're going to speak against him. And ultimately what occurs is they go into the Jami Bani Umayyah and they take axes and destroy his mimbar. And they say, we've decided that no one can teach here unless he's a Shafi'i and an Ash'ari. No one else. Now, in mentioning these events, Al-Hafiz al-Dhahabi, who himself is a Shafi'i and an Ash'ari, he says about this, وقرأت بخط الإمام الحافظ الذهبي ردا على ما نقل إجماع على تكفيره, because those Ash'aris that had done that group, they said it's ijma' that Al-Hafiz Abdul Wahid Al-Maqdisi is kafir. It's ijma' that he's kafir. Al-Dhahabi says about this incident, he says, أما قوله أجمعوا, as far as their statement that they made ijma', فما أجمعوا, they didn't make ijma'. بل أفتى بذلك بعض أئمة الأشاعرة. This was some of the Imams of Ash-Sham, ممن كفروه, of those that declared him kafir, وكفرهم هو. And this is what happened. So they declared him kafir, and he responded to them, right? Meaning that they called him a kafir, he responded. Because that's one of the few times in Islam, if someone accuses you of something, you can respond. So he said, you've called me a kafir, no, you're a kafir, right? So he responded to them. And it's not that there was no ijma' of the ummah upon his kufr, من أن الصفات الثابتة محمولة على الحقيقة, but instead that he had said, like the Hanabila and all the hadith scholars in history have said, that the established sifat have a haqiqa, لا على المجاز, not a majaz. أعني أنها تجري على مواردها. And Al-Dhahabi, again, Ash'ari says, what that means is that the attributes are kept according to that they have an existence, and that's what's been narrated. And they are not explained according to other expressions. كما فعلته المعتزلة, just as what was done by the Mu'tazila, أو المتأخرون من الأشاعرة, or the latter day Ash'aris. هذا ما أن صفاته تعالى يماثلها شيء. And this is because there is no resemblance between Allah's names and attributes in any way with anything, right? So Al-Dhahabi himself says that what was done was wrong, and by them doing takfir, these other things, there's no ijma' any more than the people claiming there's ijma' that if you call Taqi ibn Taymiyyah Shaykh al-Islam, you're a kafir. If you don't call him kafir, you're kafir, right? These things Dhahabi has not agreed, and other historians such as Ibn al-Najjar, Ash'a'ira, and Hanabila have not agreed this. Well, there was an attempt on Al-Hafiz Abdul Ghani Al-Maqdisi. There was an attempt on his life, but they failed to catch him, and he left in the day and made his way to Egypt. And upon making his way to Egypt, he was safe there. But one of the Ash'aris there wrote a letter in Egypt to try to see if they could have him killed there in Egypt. But nothing came to it, and he died there in the year 600 of the Hijri. He died in the year 600 of the Hijri, not long after Eid al-Fitr. So this is the Imam's life that he built his life around. It was a life of jihad. It was a life of Quran. It was a life of fiqh. And those that had accused him were not able to lay hands upon him or to harm him. Now, in looking at this, I want to mention more of his written legacy. Because his written legacy, he wrote a book called Al-Misbah fi Ulum al-Hadith al-Sihah, the sparkling lamp in the essence of the Ahadith of the Sihah, which is 48 sections, in which he explains the Ahadith and the Sahihain in detail and their narrators. He also has the Kitab Nihayat al-Murad, the highest level of the one seeking proof. Nihayat al-Murad min kalam khayr al-ibad. This book is the highest regard for the one seeking the words of the best of creation. This book is teaching about certain narratives about the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, its goodness, its blessing, what we can learn from his life and his household, as well as ahadith about certain special things about him. And that hadith, he didn't finish it, but it is printed. He's written some 200 books in areas regarding hadith. He's written a book called Al-Jihad wal-Mujahideen, about jihad and the mujahideen, where he quotes a hadith about mujahideen, ayat, evidences about the virtues of jihad. He has Fi Fada'il Khayr al-Bariyah, the virtues of the best of creation, which is 4 sections. He has a Kitab al-Dhikr, which is a Kitab of Sunan Dhikr. Kitab al-Tahajjud, a book about Tahajjud. Kitab al-Rawdah, which is about fiqh, so fiqh and matters connected to it. The Kitab al-Silat min al-Ahya ila al-Amwat, the connection between the living and the dead, how there is connection between the living and the dead, how people can be seen in a wakeful state, even though they're deceased. You have Kitab al-Sifat, which is about the position regarding the Sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Khabariyah. This Mihnatul Imam Ahmad, the Inquisition of Imam Ahmad, which is in 3 parts. That's been printed like several times. There's a Kitab Dhamm al-Riya, the blameworthy nature of showing off in deeds. Dhamm al-Ghiba, the blameworthy nature of Ghiba. At-Targhib fi Du'a, inviting people and enjoining them to make dua, which is 1 large volume. And that's what Ibn al-Mabrid based his book, Kitab al-Du'a, on, which is that book is like almost 1,000 pages, massive. That's like, I'd love to translate that. That's huge because it goes through like the etiquettes of dua, how to make dua, the different sunan dua. It's an amazing book. There's another one called Fada'il Mecca, the virtues of Mecca, which is in 4 sections. Al-Amru Ma'ruf al-Nahy 'an al-Munkar, enjoining the right and forbidding the wrong, which is 1 section. Fada'il Ramadan, the virtues of Ramadan. Fada'il Ashr Dhul Hijjah, the virtues of the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah. Fada'il Sadaqah, the virtues of Sadaqah. Fada'il al-Hajj, the virtues of Hajj. Fada'il Rajab, the virtues of Rajab. Wafatun Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the death of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and what that meant, the catastrophe of it. We also have al-Arba'in, a hadith and the 40 ahadith. Kitab al-Arba'in, another hadith, the 40. Al-Arba'in min kalam Rabbil Alameen, 40 ahadith from the Lord of all creation. Because writing the 40 ahadith is because of it's a hadith, although it's weak, but the hadith is where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is permitted for use. It says, whoever memorized 40 ahadith from me is sure to enter the paradise. Right, that hadith is from Quda'i and others. That so many scholars have written 40 hadith collections. We know about Nawawi, but there's other, like Abu Bakr al-Ajurri wrote a 40 hadith collection, right? Abdul Ghani Wahid Al-Maqdisi wrote a 40 hadith collection. There's a lot of scholars that wrote an Arba'in collection because of trying to get that blessing. There's another one which is called I'tiqad al-Imam al-Shafi'i, the creed of Imam Shafi'i, and he wrote that from collected statements from Imam Shafi'i's books to show that Imam Shafi'i had the creed of the first 3 generations and was not an Ash'ari. And he wrote this to show, like, you're persecuting me, but I actually have the exact same creed. And some of them relented after this book was released. Al-Hakayat, the narratives, righteous stories. These are true stories about righteous people in the past, what they went through, how they overcame hardship. Very good book. Niyatul Hafaz fi Tahqiq al-Mushkil al-Alfaz. This is the intention of the memorizers regarding difficult passages in ahadith. Right, so difficult things to work out in ahadith, narrators, difficult to pronounce things. Al-Jami' al-Saghir li Ahkam al-Bashir al-Nadhir, the small collection regarding the ahadith of Bashir al-Nadhir. And this, Imam As-Suyuti rahimahullah was inspired by this book to write his Jami' al-Saghir, which is 2 big volumes. And then we have Fi Dhikr al-Qubur, in remembering the graves, right? So etiquettes that you're supposed to have at the graves. Etiquettes, what you're supposed to do. Manaqib Umar Abdul Aziz, the virtues of Umar Abdul Aziz, right? Then he had obviously the Umdat al-Ahkam, Al-Umdat al-Ahkam al-Kubra al-Sughra, he had those. Al-Ahkam al-Abwab al-Fiqh. So now he mentions rulings in hadith, but laid out according to the fiqh books. So he lays out from the book of waters all the way to the book of giving judgments, right? Shahadat, right? And then he lays them out according to the method of the hadith scholar. And Nasiha fil Ad'iyyah, fil Ad'iyyah as-Sahiha, right? This is called the good advice regarding authentic du'as. Al-Iqtisad fil i'tiqad, which we mentioned. His Kitab al-Tawheed, which we mentioned. As-Sifat, we mentioned. Siratun Nabi, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Now, this is a very simple seerah where he just quotes what everyone's agreed upon, the agreed upon narratives about everything. So this is what we know about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is what we know about his companions. So he mentions that, the 10 promised paradise, his wives, the household, the Ahlul Bayt. It's a very simple, short, sharp book. It's a very good book.
And
Very, very good book.
this book, was it studied after you were to read the Sirah of Ibn Hisham?
Yes, you study this one after Sirah of Ibn Hisham, because those are the points that you want to have a really strong grasp of the Sirah Nabawiyah. But if you're looking to like memorize the main points to take away, like, okay, when did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam receive his first revelation? 40. Okay,
Right.
how long was he in Mecca? 13 years. How long was he in Medina? 10. Right? How many surahs were in Mecca? 86. Right? How many in Medina? There's like those are things you need to remember. Not just for historicity's sake, but also ahkam, because okay, most of the Quran is revealed in Mecca. So when you're looking at ayat, you want to know which ones are abrogated, which ones are not. Right? Which companions? So you say, okay, Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, he became Muslim 4 to 6 years before the death of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Well, why is that important? Well, because he narrated the ahadith, and a lot of the ahadith that he narrated abrogate other ahadith before. Because if certain Sahaba, if they're the last ones to narrate on a topic, you can say, oh, okay, that's the last amal of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam on a particular action, right? So those things are important to know. Who were his wives? Why? Well, because based upon their age and who they were, that will tell you what actions he last did, right? Who were the 10 promised paradise, right? Who were the first 4 khulafa? Who were his Ahl al-Bayt, right? These are all points that are important to know for fiqh, for rulings, knowledge of deen affairs, right? He also has books on, what he says, Al-Kamal fi Ma'rifat al-Rijal, right, which is dealing with the men of the Sahihain and Abu Dawud, imagine. And it's 10 volumes, but some printed ones are in 21 volumes. And in this book, because this is one of his last books, he actually mentions a little bit about his inquisition that he's going through. He's like, as I'm writing this, there's people that are lying about me. Like, he's actually mentioning, subhanAllah. He actually mentions that just to make sure. I think he kind of wrote that just in case he gets killed, just in case he gets martyred, so you can know his thoughts.
I was also wondering one thing. The Inquisition, did it take place after he went in the army of Salahuddin Ayyubi, or was that before it?
This was after. This was after.
No.
Because now they're trying to establish themselves as a group in Sham, which makes you ask the question. You have to say, well, wait a minute, hold on. If they arrive in North Africa and start coming to Sham, what was Sham like? What were they before this? Like, what were the people on? Like, if they weren't Ahl Bid'ah, like, what was their i'tiqad before? Like, North Africa wasn't Ahl Bid'ah, so what was their i'tiqad? Like, what were most of the scholars before? Like, what was this? That leads to these questions. Because if they're doing all this fighting to come to power, who are they fighting? It's not Ahl Bid'ah. Who are they fighting?
No.
Which makes you ask these questions. Why is it that the vast majority of people that stand up in favor of Abdul Wahid Al-Maqdisi are the laity, and some other scholars, it's like laymen, are like coming up saying it's wrong what you're doing. So what's the creed of the layman then?
No, subhanAllah.
Like, these types of things should make you, like, someone hearing this or listening to this or reading these historical accounts needs to ask these questions. Why is it the laymen are interfering? Why is it so many times when they go to the rulers and say, yeah, this person needs to be, the ruler's like, no, I'm not going to kill him. Why? There's nothing wrong. And then the ruler will listen to him recite the creed and say, no, this is fine. Like, why would that happen? Why did Kawkab Daddy, Shamsuddin Kawkab Daddy, who is Hanafi, but he says, upon hearing the creed statements of Abu Umar al-Maqdisi, he says, that's my creed. So then what's his creed? Right? You have to start asking like these really important questions about the history of the Muslim world and the history to now, especially from the laymen from the first 3 generations up until now. Their i'tiqad has not changed. Now, if you say, well, the majority of scholars engage in this, yeah, that's probably true. That's probably true. But that's not a proof against the vast majority of the laity. That's
No,
it's not a proof against the vast majority of the ummah.
they are in the prophecy of the Jama'ah, right? The
Yes,
Sawad
yes,
al-A'zam.
that's it. And that's what they're doing. That's why when you try to go to the laity with these sophisticated arguments, they're confused. Because I can say for something like even using like language like Tawheed language, Rubi, Uluhiyya, Hakimiyya, Ismail wa Sifat, perfect being theory, what's impossible, what's possible, what's wajib for Allah. My grandparents had no idea. And I knew my parents didn't know about this. My grandparents on both sides, my great grandparents, none of them ever taught us
No.
this or had any idea of what any of these things were.
Yeah, same my family.
Yeah, it's just these are the things. And common laity, no matter where you go, the same situations there, unless we're going to say that most of the common laity Ahl Bid'ah or what have you, this is nonsense. Right? So he carries on from here, and there was an incident in which someone saw a dream of Abdul Ghani ibn Abdul Wahid Al-Maqdisi, and he gave them glad tidings in the dream and said that Allah has blessed them and given them goodness. There was also an incident before. He said, Abu Muhammad Abdul Rahman ibn Muhammad ibn Abdul Jabbar al-Maqdisi, he said, I heard Al-Hafiz Abdul Ghani ibn Abdul Wahid al-Maqdisi saying, I asked Allah that He sustain me like He sustained Imam Ahmed during the time of his mihna, and that He sustained me with salah like He sustained him with his salah. And Ibn Abdul Jabbar al-Maqdisi said, after that, the mihna began for Abdul Ghani Abdul Wahid al-Maqdisi. Also, the people of Esbahan, upon hearing the death of Abdul Ghani ibn Abdul Wahid al-Maqdisi, there were weekly readings of Ma'rifatul Sahaba, which is a book that he wrote. He wrote a book on how to know the difference between a Sahabi and a non-Sahabi when they're narrating different narratives, because it's easy to mix them up if you don't know enough. So he narrated this book. There were dreams of him in diverse places, like in Mosul, people had dreams of him. People saw glad tidings of him in dreams. And one of them, Ziauddin al-Maqdisi, he narrates an incident when Al-Hafiz Abdul Ghani ibn Abdul Wahid al-Maqdisi was alive. He narrates an incident when he was alive. He said, وَسَمِعْتُ الْحَافِظ يقول, I heard the Hafiz saying, كُنَّ بِالْموصل نسمع الجرح والتعديل للعقيلي. I was in Mosul in Iraq, and we were listening to the book of Jarh and Ta'dil by Al-Uqayli. فأخذني أهل الموصل وحسبوني وأراد قتلي من أجل ذكر أبي حنيفة فيه. While we were listening to the book, all of a sudden, some of the authorities of the people of Mosul came in and snatched me. And they jailed me and wanted to kill me because of what was mentioned in the book about Abu Hanifa. فجاءني رجل طويل معه سيف. And so while I was in jail, some tall man came to me bearing a sword. فقلت لعلي هذا يقتلني واستريح. This man came with the sword and it was unsheathed, and I said to myself, this might be the man that kills me and brings me to nothing. قال فلم يصنع شيء. But the man didn't do anything. ثم إنهم أطلقوني. But then they let me free after this point. Now, what this is about, is the book of Jarh wa Ta'dil by Uqayli is a book about hadith narrators. And it mentions within that book that Imam Abu Hanifa is weak in narration. Now, Al-Hafiz Abdul Ghani ibn Abdul Wahid al-Maqdisi is teaching the book. And he was taken hold of by some people. But he's not, the book, that statement is misinterpreted. It's misinterpreted. Here's how. Imam Abu Hanifah rahimahullah wa radiyallahu anhu, he's one of the tabi'een. He saw Anas ibn Malik, he took some hadith from him. He saw some other sahaba. Ali ibn Abi Talib made dua for him and said, well, Allah make him an imam. There's no argument about
Subhanallah.
Imam Abu Hanifah radiallahu anhu and Nu'man ibn Thabit al-Kufi. But the people of hadith, which we knew that there's two methodologies with how you use fatwa. There's Ahl al-Ray and Ahl al-Hadith. Ahl al-Hadith, they sit and they narrate hadith. It's been narrated from so-and-so, from so-and-so, from so-and-so, from so-and-so. It has been narrated from this, from this, from this, and thus and so. That's how they narrate hadith in a majlis. The style that I teach in the Sama'a classes, that's a majlis, that's an Ahl Hadith style. It's one of the variations of that style. That's how I teach. I don't know any other way to teach because I wasn't taught any other way.
Oh.
If there is, I'm not saying it's inferior or better. I'm just saying I don't know another way because I haven't seen another way. But I hear that there are other ways, right? But it's just, that's what I know. So that's all I can do. So when the hadith scholars look at the Ahl al-Hadith or Ashab al-Hadith, look at the Ahl al-Ray, the Imam Abu Hanifah Nu'man ibn Thabit al-Kufi radiallahu anhu, he didn't teach in the Ahl al-Hadith way. He discussed a hadith in the course of discussing the fatwa and the ahkam and these other things. And so he would quote them alongside of, but he didn't sit and quote narrated from. He only did that 14 times. He only did that 14 times in his career. So because of that, the scholars of Jarh and Ta'deel say he only quoted 14 ahadith from a sanad. Not that he only knew 14 ahadith. He only quoted 14 ahadith after the pattern of who? Ashabul Hadith.
No.
So they say, if you use him as a hadither, he's da'if because he only quoted 14. Not that he's da'if, that he's not thiqah, that he's not, no. But according to the Ashab al-Hadith method, he only quoted 14 hadith. So his Musnad Abu Hanifah, which is small, or the Musnad al-Shafi'i, which is small compared to Musnad Imam Ahmed, doesn't mean they're weak or da'if in hadith. It means according to the Ashab al-Hadith method, he's weak because he didn't sit and regularly quote a hadith like we do. And so because of that, you wouldn't use him as an absolute hadith source in the way of Ahl al-Hadith. And because now, brothers have translated that hadith, dishonest students of knowledge, and then dishonest brothers in English have then said, oh, Abu Hanifa only knew 14 hadith.
Exactly.
And so they've ran with it. Now, now that we understand that, when Abdul Ghani Wahid Al-Maqdisi quotes that section, local governors that were Hanafi fanatics, and you have to remember, there's still a lot of them are Mu'tazila at this point, still, because of the 5 centuries of Hanafis and Mu'tazila, they grab a hold of Abdul Ghani ibn Abdul Wahid Al-Maqdisi, and he's going to get in trouble until they read the section and they realize, oh, because they think he's disparaging Imam Abu Hanifah. Yes, disparaging the first 3 generations could get you killed because you're undermining the Sahaba, them. Yeah, that's true. But that's not what that section of Uqayli is about. And Uqayli, rahimahullah, has long died. So why are we being, why? Because it's like, you have to remember, Abdul Ghani Abdul Wahid Al-Maqdisi, he's in a class. So why would everyone in the class be seized when we're reading from a book? And then I'm reading after the book, I'm reading the section of the book. He's not disparaging the Hanafi school. We're reading from the book.
No.
But these are the types of things that happen when some slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if they have an agenda, that the only thing they can do is, resort to violence or to try to get you killed or things like this. A lot of these things are misunderstandings. And sometimes those misunderstandings are amplified by certain people who have bad intention, like proper su'al adab, like really, really bad adab, that they're looking to do that. But because the laity aren't doing that, the laity are listening to these kutub being narrated, and they're not coming to any conclusion about the Imam Abu Hanifah rahimahullah or anyone else. They're not coming to those conclusions. Because that book by Uqayli, Al-Jarh wa Ta'deel, I didn't go through it, but it was being taught in our mahad. And no one ever came out of those classes saying that Yes, Imam Abu Hanifah, his madhab is weak because we had some Hanafi brothers in our ahkam
Mm-hmm.
class for Bulugh al-Maram and Umdat al-Ahkam. No one ever, there was like a Syrian Hanafi brother, and there was another one from Egypt. We never thought that, oh, they're lesser than because they're
Mm-hmm.
no one ever thought that. We only just thought that their ahkam, like what we thought it was really unique because their issue, like that they had a qawl in their madhab about double shadow asr. Many of us had never heard that they're wait, hold on, you are praying asr at double shadow time, like as a sunnah. It's not
Mm-hmm.
like, I wasn't able to pray it during it. Like we were in shock because if you would never heard it before, you've always heard that
Right.
asr's best time is from dhillu mithli to dhillu mithlay. That's
Mm.
all we knew. We don't know any.
No.
So we didn't disparage brothers. We're just like, wow, subhanallah, we never heard of that. Or some of the other aqwals that the Hanafis, we'd never heard. But for us, it was just a matter to get ilm.
Mm-hmm.
So when Al-Jarh wa Ta'dil by Uqayli is read, even the author Uqayli himself, it's like he came from a Hanafi family, although he's Shafi. There's nothing in the book that he said, finally, I will destroy the Hanafi. There's nothing in there. Any more than Abu Bakr ibn Abi Shayba, his book Ar-Rad ala Abi Hanifa, refutation of Abu Hanifa. No one tried to kill Abu Bakr ibn Abi Shayba because the book was written regarding the topic of Rafa al-Yadayn, because Imam Abu Hanifah rahimahullah and others had held that Rafa al-Yadayn is abrogated, other than the first part of the Salah, the Takbir Tahrima. But no one said
Mm-hmm.
Abu Bakr ibn Abi Shayba's got to die,
No.
or that anyone's got to die. Like no one, because people were knowledgeable. But you can see, because you have to remember, Abu Bakr ibn Abi Shayba he's born in the third age, but it's going into the fourth. So there's still that level of knowledge and decorum at that time. But it's after that you get to Abdul Ghani and Abdul Wahid Al-Maqdisi. When you get to that time that you start to see the decorum starts to fall away a little bit. And then by the time of Taqi and Taymiyyah, it just, subhanAllah, people are destroying mimbars. Like that was just one example. Abdul Ghani and Abdul Wahid Al-Maqdisi, like destroying a mimbar.
Mm-hmm.
And we're told that every mimbar is the mimbar of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So to destroy a mimbar to the point that it's nothing but wood shavings, like it's just like, subhanAllah. The mimbar is nothing but wood shavings. And then to say no one can teach here but just us. It's a really serious problem. But none of that did anything to dull the career of Abdul Ghani and Abdul Wahid Al-Maqdisi. Like none of it dulled his career, because he still is the premier figure in hadith.
Mm-hmm.
Every time someone says akhrajahu al-Bukhari wa Muslim, or wa Muslim bi infiradihi, or Muslim uniquely narrates this, or rawahu Bukhari wa Muslim fi sahihihima, or muttafaqun alayh, or wa sahahu al-Bukhari, or rawahu al-Jama'a, or rawahu tis'a, or rawahu khamsa, or rawahu al-Jama'a illa sunan. Like every time someone uses that, he's getting some of the barakah. He's getting some of that barakah. He's getting some of those blessings. Every time that happens.
Mm-hmm.
And his rank under Tabaqat al-Hufaz, Siyar A'lam al-Nubala, Tarikh al-Islam by Dhahabi, these other books, and these are people, they're not Hanbali fanatics, because some brothers think, oh, Abu Ja'far al-Hanbali, he's a Hanbali fanatic. It's like, no, these are people who are Asha'ira, they're Shafi'is, Hanafis, they're saying the same thing, that he's fiqh.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I made it a point to quote Ibn al-Najjar, who's Shafi'i, quoted Dhahabi. I've quoted many other people who are Ash'ari to show that the conclusions that they're coming to about Abdul Ghani ibn Abdul Wahid al-Maqdisi are well-deserved, and that his rank is well-established. Otherwise, I could have just quoted, oh, it's just Ibn Rajab. It's just, someone could say, well, it could be that only they're saying, right? But no, the quote about what he knows, his level of hifz, is from Al-Dhahabi, who says it's 700,000, right? It's others that say that he knows more than Abu Musa. He knows more than a Silafi. It's those that are saying it, that he's Amir al-Mu'mineen in Hadith. They're not saying it, right? Diyauddin al-Maqdisi, rahimahullah, is only one of those that's confirming. But if someone says, yeah, but Diyauddin al-Maqdisi died 643 Hijri, he's from his family, he's Hanbali like him, he has the same creed, obviously he's going to say, okay, so we quote Dhahabi, so we quote Ibn al-Najjar, so we quote Ibn al-Jabbar al-Maqdisi, so you can't argue now, right? So then we understand the rank of these people. And so I want to say 5 big legacies that Abdul Ghani ibn Abdul Wahid Al-Maqdisi left behind? I want to mention 5 big things. Okay. So, Taqi Abu Muhammad Abdul Ghani ibn Abdul Wahid Al-Maqdisi leaves behind 5 huge legacies. Number 1, he has left behind a huge legacy in upholding the creed of the first 3 generations, not just for himself, but for the laity, so that we take away from that the truth of what Muslim orthodoxy is established upon from the first 3 generations up until now and until the day where we are all raised. The second is he had a tremendous love and respect for the Hadith. So much so that he tried to make the Hadith more accessible to us as students of knowledge or laity by giving us the names of the narrators, giving us the names of the dates, the people, so that when people study these ahadith to understand that they're sahih because of this sahabi, they're sahih because of this. And he started the Kamal collection by sending abundant peace and blessings on the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And there's no argument about he's above fiqh, he's the dalil. But he wanted to show that this is what this is all about. It's about being connected to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Number 3, legacy. He leaves behind a legacy of the love of learning and knowledge. His life, when he wasn't making salah, when he wasn't doing dhikr, when he wasn't reading Quran, his life was heavily grounded in the love of learning. And that love of learning should be something that excites all of us and makes all of us extremely excited to, in whatever capacity, because someone may say, well, I'm not going to be a scholar. Yes, but if you're just going to be a righteous layman, just to strive to be the utmost of what you can do, the utmost, that should be one of your inspirations. Number 4, he is a proof of what you can do as a child of refugees, that your life doesn't have to be over, or that because you're refugees, being a refugee doesn't have to mean humiliation. You and I both are the children of refugees, right? We both grown up in many ways outside of the lands where our people come from. But yet we're here talking on the phone. We make our salah, we establish our right. It's not the end of the line for us. It's just part of our lives. It's part of the bigger adventure of what we are as believers. And it's a learning experience, because maybe if we'd been back in where we'd lived, perhaps we wouldn't have been as strong as we are today. Or perhaps we would have met other issues that we didn't meet here. Perhaps our knowledge, the fact that we've seen both, what it is to not be one and to be one, to see what Darul Islam is and to see what Darul Kufr is, maybe that's prepared us to be maybe better men or better husbands for when the time comes. And Abdul Ghani Abdul Wahid Al-Maqdisi, he leaves behind the legacy of 4 children. He had 4 sons and equal or more daughters, depending on the accounts. He left behind a legacy of hadith scholars after him. These were the children that are the sons of refugees. The 5th and final is that he had these karamat, extreme karamat, of where he was able to travel the short distance from Sham to Egypt in a day, which on foot, that should be impossible. But according to accounts, he did so. His level of hifz in a short period of time, his knowledge in a short period of time. What we see from that 5th and final point is that wilaya, being a wali, in doing these incredible feats that Allah blesses you with, is first of all based around what? Being truthful to Allah and the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If you do that, the people that do that, those are the awliya. They're not awliya because they have karramat. The karramat are the proof of their wilayah. And we mustn't lose sight of that fact. The karramat are the proof of your wilayah. They're not the proof that you're a wali in of itself. You being a wali is established. The karramat are just what gives that. And that's what we see from all of what he's done is because of his obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So a man that lived from 541 to 600 Hijri, someone would look at that and think, subhanallah, that's a short period of time. That's only 59 years. But look at what he got done. The man fulfilled his obligations. I didn't mention he went on Hajj. So he fulfilled the 5 pillars. He gave zakah. He went on jihad. He traveled a huge amounts of the Muslim world. Like he did all of that in 59 years of life. He did all of that. And he was persecuted and came out on the better side of the persecution. Because some people that underwent persecution, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have written for him that he went the way of Buwaiti, who was beheaded. Or Khuzai, but for whatever reason, Allah didn't write that way for him. And it's that dua, he said, let me go the way of Imam Ahmad, let Allah suffice me with him and his salah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala vindicated his name. He came out of jail, he was vindicated. He came out of jail in Mosul. Allah vindicated his name. And now he's this towering figure in hadith. He's this towering figure in Asma al-Rijal. He's this towering figure in all these other fields. This great Hafiz of hadith is immortalized because of his obedience to Allah and his messenger. And we ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives that to us as inspiration and makes us among those people in whatever capacity. Even the people that say, well, I could never reach those levels. Fine, let's say you don't believe you can, or you have other obligations because of whatever the issue may be. But that doesn't mean that in your field, can you be the best layman you can be? Can you be the best? Can you be the best steel worker you can be? Can you be the best welder you can be? Can you be the best school teacher you can be? Can you be the best data analyst you can be? The best IT? And if you do so with that niyyah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make you the best, inshallah. Don't think that, oh, well, I can never reach the level of hifz, and then you lose heart and you become sad. No, la tahzan. Don't mourn. Don't be sad about that. Instead, what can I be the best at in my field? And you do that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will raise your rank, inshallah, in ways that you can't even understand how.
Like some of the brothers they have in this world, their inclination is more towards fighting in the way of Allah than necessarily going deep into knowledge.
This is correct. And those slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they're there, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses them. For example, when you look at the big books that Mujahideen have left behind, you have Muwaffaq Qudama left behind the Mughni and the Kafi that have the most developed books of jihad in their time. You have Taqi ibn Taymiyyah, who left the book Majmu' Fatawa. It's really developed regarding fiqh and jihad. Most Mujahideen, no matter what madhahib they are, they tend to fall back on those and then the Encyclopedia of Jihad. Now, Salahuddin Al-Ayyubi, had he left behind a book, we'd be reading that, but he didn't. His life, although he was a sheikh in his own right, he was a faqih and even knowledgeable in his own right, but he didn't leave behind a written legacy like that because his inclination was towards that. And Allah rewarded him and blessed him because his inclination was building schools rather than teaching in them, building libraries rather than writing books, securing his rule rather than necessarily writing the books that would be used for that rule. But that doesn't take away from his rank. His rank is established. He's immortalized in the books. He's immortalized in the book as one of the great mujahids of history.
Absolutely.
Just like Umar Mukhtar, the great mujahid of Libya, rahimahullah, he's immortalized. He didn't leave behind this substantial cache of books. He did not. Or the Rifi, Shaykh Abdul Karim Al-Rifi, the great mujahid from Morocco. He didn't leave behind a huge amount of books in a repository. Or Abdul Qadir Al-Jazairi. He didn't. Abdul Majid. He didn't leave behind he left behind some books, but not a huge repository.
Mm.
Much of his teaching, Abdul Majid, was oral. So he has like recordings on cassette tapes or videotapes that are being converted into a digital format, right? Some of those mujahideen are sheikhs or alims or whatever in their own right, or even if they're not alims, they're striving the cause of Allah. So they're establishing the deen in other ways.
It's like when we look at the companions, Sayyidina Khalid, he's known for his jihad, but Sayyidina Ibn Mas'ud is known for producing fuqaha.
Yes, and we acknowledge that. But
Naam.
these men are both great, and they're both men that belong to the people of the paradise. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed them. And we see what they've done and how they've
Allah.
perfected and bettered themselves, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed them. And Khalid radiallahu anhu, he dies in bed in Homs and is buried there. And his grave is just as much as a meshhead
Naam.
as other Sahaba in the area.
Mhm.
Even though he
Allah.
didn't leave behind legions of fuqaha or legions of scholars. No, he left behind the cities that he opened for the sake of Allah, the people that he protected, the women and children that were under the shade of Islam because of his sacrifices. That's what he leaves behind. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewarded him and gave him abundant blessings for that.
Allahumma ameen.